Alright, so here we are, moving on to our next stage of constructing our Mandalorian armor from cardboard. You can see here that I used life cereal boxes, backed that with fiberglass resin, chop strand, and polyester resin and fiberglass chop strand. And you also notice I topped it off with RONDO, color variations off a little bit, but you can see I sanded it down from our last video. I found out that it was probably either the resin was too old or the hardener was not working correctly. I had used that older resin with a hardener that I had been using on some other pieces, and it seemed to work fine, but when I purchased the new hardener, it didn't work well with that resin. I bought some new polyester resin, and the hardener didn't work well with that either. So I went ahead and just got rid of the resin and hardener, and decided I was going to try using RONDO because as you can see, and I covered in the last video as well, the polyester resin began to crack and bubble. It was taking forever to cure, so I went ahead and sanded down some pieces. I've cut off some of the bubbles, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you in this video how we applied the RONDO to fix that. Again, you can see the RONDO comes out, it's much smoother, it's pretty dense, and I'm going to go back over some of the low spots here with some glazing putty and get that prepped for priming and painting. Before I put the glazing putty on, however, I am going to mount this, figure out where my mounting screws are going to go to attach it to my flak vest. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. You want to make sure that you are using safety equipment. I'm going to use a respirator as well as some gloves, and we're going to be mixing both the Bondo body filler and the fiberglass resin 1-to-1, and then we're going to add the hardeners to that, and we'll have a few minutes to play with that and get that onto our piece before it starts to cure. So let's get started. Not sure if you can hear me with the respirator on, so I might be going back and narrating over this video. You can also hear the vehicles next to me in the parking lot. Hopefully they're not too loud. But you can also see here where I use some aluminum tape to cover up some cardboard to fill in this display area on the left chest piece, as well as set up a little bit of a dam, if you might say, to prevent the RONDO from rolling off the edge. So that's about how much we're going to be using. Slightly, I guess, larger than a golf ball size. So we're going to do kind of a 1-to-1. Might have just a little bit too much hardener, or excuse me, body filler. We're going to go ahead and start mixing this up. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area and that you have a respirator on. This stuff will make it very, very hard to remember your name, or make it hard to count too, maybe. You want to mix this up really good. Scrape it off the bottom. We're going to have this consistency here, kind of like a milkshake. Just going to mix it just a little more. You can continue mixing this as well. This will not harden.
will not harden until you add the hardener for both the body filler and the polyester resin. You want to make sure you work this too, massage this, because this tends to separate if you haven't used it in a while. Now the clock starts ticking. Sure, get in all the edges first. Too much hardener. Too much hardener. So I've got a new batch mixed up here. Again, you'll see about that milkshake consistency. Let's see what we can do here. Hopefully we can get that to bond with what we've already got on there. If not, I'll be sanding a lot.
As you can see, it's already starting to cure and set up. It's really warm to the touch. What I would recommend is that you always check your container to see, and again, that hardener, that activator is really kicking in. Exothermic, giving off a reaction here as it's curing. It's getting really, really hot. What I'm going to be doing though is I'm going to be going back and trimming the edges. This is very similar to green trimming fiberglass, because you can see how easy it is to cut this to shape, to get some of the rough edges off. We're going to try that here with our piece. To peel off all the aluminum tape first. The last time I did this, I used combination painter's tape and masking tape. It was easier to get off, but had to spend a lot more time in the prep. So I decided to use this aluminum tape here just to see how that might turn out. We'll come back to that. See what this green trim's gonna do for us. See, it's coming off pretty easy now, and you're just saving yourself the extra work when you're gonna have to do a lot of sanding if you let this cure all the way. So you want to minimize that as much as possible. At least I do. Because we're going to have to go back in and sand this and level it out. But again, just trying to make it a little easier on ourselves. It's like I picked the right time. If I'd waited any longer on this, it would have been really tough to cut. You might also get some fingerprints. You can see where my prints are here, maybe. Don't worry about that, because once you get in and you start sanding this, those will disappear. You don't want to go gouging into it though. You'll have to cover that with some putty. Our display is going to be pretty accurate as well. So we're finally back inside. I brought my pieces in to line them up, just to give you a little compare and contrast between the cardboard that we started out with and what we started covering with our resin and chopped strand fiberglass. And then this is our piece that I wound up having to save in the last video. So what I did is I mixed the Rondo, which is a 50-50 resin and body filler, and you use 50-50 hardener as well. So you're doing about a half and half, and then you can brush that on, and then once that dries, probably about 10-15 minutes later, you can actually green cut that. So you can cut off a lot of the rough edges, and it'll save you some work on the sanding. What I did here, you can see I sanded it down. I've got some low spots here, and I also I'll have to be going over that with some glazing putty just to make that a little smoother. What I wanted to do as well is make sure that I shape this correctly. So I'll use the chop strand side, the rough side. I hit that with a heat gun and then kind of shape this into the end result. Basically what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the proper curve, as well as this piece here that comes down in front of the rib cage. I want to make sure that that has the right angles on it. So just a heat gun, and pressing that up against my flak jacket. I just want to be careful. You want to make sure you're using some type of gloves to protect your hands, as well as that flak jacket will probably give you some insulation so that you're not putting this directly on your skin or through a thin t-shirt. So this one's almost ready, and then here you can see the left chest piece where I cut out the display windows. I'm going to have to go ahead and cut off some extra edges here. I green cut a lot of the rough stuff off, but I'm going to hit this with an orbital sander. You'll see that in the next video. And I'm going to take it down and try to get it as smooth as possible so that I can put glazing putty on both of those. And for those of you that might not have used this before, this is what your glazing spot putty looks like. It will give you a red finish, and this is just to fill in some of the low spots. So you don't want to do the whole thing with this, although you could, but it might be a little too brittle once you put your primer on. So you just want to use this on the low spots, which are these dark areas here from the original sanding. So again, about halfway done, I would say. I still have to shape the shoulder pieces as well as the one that covers the neck and collarbone. But progressing nicely, I think. And then once we get these shaped into their final form, I'll go ahead and start putting on my screws so that I can mount that to the flak jacket itself.